idiot treating her like this? What does she need to do so that her soul doesn't hurt like this anymore? What should the main character do with all this now? Everything in the duchy is not at all as it should have been. Is this what the Duchess and Duke of Wiliot wanted for her? They had no illusions about their son. Even they didn't expect such dirt. In her own house, Countess Tebessa hated her stepdaughter because Layla was the child of her mistress. This was the reason for the furious and unbridled hatred towards Lady Layla. The Countess could not harm her mistress and took it out on her child. And the worst thing is that now in her fiancé's house the poor girl is humiliated much worse than in her own home. But Layla still needs to continue living with this idiot because their wedding and acceptance of the title of Duchess are ahead. The heroine approached her wedding dress and touched the pleasant white festive fabric. Her personal maid came into the room and asked if her mistress would embroider a handkerchief for her fiancé. With all these events, the girl completely forgot about the scarf for the Duke for such a distinguished event. After all, it is the Emperor's debut. Noblemen are supposed to receive handkerchiefs from those they dream of, so usually the lady keeps such a handkerchief with her. How could Layla forget such a detail? She never gives up and always finishes the job. The personal maid did not know that it was quite difficult for her mistress to sew a scarf for her fiancé. She was sure that Layla was an excellent sewer. However, the girl embroidered the scarf a long time ago, then Phelan went to war. Many years have passed. Due to the Duke's departure, Layla needed to make him a handkerchief so that Wiliot could show it upon his return to the estate. When the main character handed her handkerchief to the future groom, the Duke burst out laughing. What a napkin! Phelan then began to tease the girl, asking what kind of bird was that on the scarf. It was definitely a coat of arms. What a funny beak. All efforts to get the handkerchief back were in vain. Phil put it in his inside pocket and promised his lady to return home. The Duke asked her to wait for her fiancé to return from the war. Layla was always warmed by this thought, but now it turns out that it was in vain. Layla was worried. She felt great running the estate, but she had a hard time with feminine hobbies. But no matter how much the main character despises this cretin, Phelan remains her fiancé and future husband. And at the imperial ball, the honor of the girl herself will be at stake, which means it will be necessary to embroider a scarf. Blood was flowing from the heroine's fingers. The personal maid noted that the poor thing had already been injured 22 times. Layla would never have thought that taking a scarf was such a difficult task. Who even invented it? The heroine added that in reality she still doesn't know how to do a lot of things, for example, cook or dance. After all, the girl devoted all her time to saving this duchy. She had no time to dance. But thanks to the teacher's efforts, Layla knows the basic movements in dance, but she has never been able to move to the rhythm. To do this, it was necessary to concentrate and keep an eye on your partner, which the young lady was unable to do. The maid couldn't believe that her mistress couldn't do it, and that was true. Everyone has their own shortcomings, and heroines have them too. There is only one day left until the imperial ball, so there is no time left for preparation and training. To embroider this stupid scarf, the heroine will have to stay up all night, but she cannot let the duchy down. A lot of effort, a sleepless night, fingers pierced by a needle, an exhausted young lady. The scarf was finished. White pleasant fabric, delicate hand embroidery with the coat of arms of the Duchy of Wiliot. It seems that not everything is so bad. Michelle called it perfect. If it weren't for the help of the maid, the girl would definitely not have made it on time. The personal maid insisted that such works must be seen by the Duke, and immediately. What was the point of working so hard and not showing it, when her mistress had tried so hard for the honor of Phelan? Layla simply had to make sure that this was no small matter for the Duke. A smile appeared on the lady's face again. But first it was necessary to prepare the young girl for the meeting. With the Duke she had not slept all night. And so the girl approaches the door of her future husband with an embarrassed look. Why are her cheeks so burning and her hands shaking? The heroine tidied herself up and put on a beautiful dress. In her hands was a beautiful box with the treasured scarf. For some reason, Lady Tebessa suddenly became embarrassed, as she had once in her youth when Phelan had lifted her scarf in mockery. At that time, this Rose didn't want to openly offend her. He just laughed childishly. But now Phil clearly didn't have warm feelings for Layla. The Duke was just coming out of his room at the right time and was surprised to see his bride at the door. Phelan asked what had happened to Lady Tebessa, why she had come to him against his will. The girl gathered her courage, took a deep breath, and handed her fiancé her homemade gift, which she had put so much effort into. Then a nasty servant stuck her head out of the door. In her hands was the same handkerchief. Why did her dear throw the handkerchief in the room? Layla carefully examined the handkerchief in the slut's hands. The white fabric was embroidered with exactly the same coat of arms with a bird as her own. The bitch's work was very skillful. Unlike Layla's work, she was always objective and hid her craft behind her back. The mistress greeted Lady Tebessa, how glad she was to see the girl, and what she had forgotten at the door of her dear Duke's room. The Duke really liked the feigned helpfulness of the scoundrel, although this fool considered it nobility and politeness. Cecile apologized for her impudence, but Layla doesn't know how to embroider, so her lover took it upon herself to embroider the scarf for her. After all, this banquet was her Duke's first debut in high society, and the trash was worried that Phil would be left without a handkerchief and would be looked at askance. That's why the mistress decided to embroider the necessary scarf for Philin instead of Lady Tebessa herself. And who does that girl think she is? Cecile didn't like the look of her Duke's future wife. Layla doesn't like something's wrong with the scarf. Philin covered his mistress with himself. Cecile actually took care of him and Layla, although she was not obliged to. What a moron! He doesn't understand at all that this is another insult and repression. How can you be so mean? The Duke accused Layla of total ingratitude. Let her stop looking at his mistress so hungrily. She is wrong. And how could such incredible parents produce such a pathetic idiot with a false sense of grandeur? This is a dead-end branch of their noble family. The girl is not at all evil. The reckless Duke allows himself too much. Philin immediately became embarrassed. Why else? Even if this streetwalker is carrying a random child, she is only a mistress. She cannot be proudly displayed. She must remain in hiding for the rest of her days. Cecile immediately began to cry, feigned tears, but she was disgusted and bursting with rage. The concert had to take place. Philin roared, "Let the lady apologize. This brat is questioning the authority of the future duchess, or he is demanding to indulge her." Not at all. The mistress just wanted to help, only Phil is led by what the vile scum instills in him. The rest of the people understand everything perfectly well. The entire huge estate was filled with the dissatisfied Duke's male cry, "How dare Layla!" Amazingly, now the rumors have been added that the two future spouses are arguing in public over their mistress. If an idiot thinks it's normal to take a handkerchief from a dirty mistress to a ball, so be it. But let him not dare to mention who he married if he doesn't want to be a laughing stock. The Duke immediately fell silent. It seemed that this donkey finally felt ashamed and realized what a stupid thing he had just done. Layla silently turned around and walked away down the corridor, not wanting to see those two freaks anymore. The personal maid was simply horrified after all. It was she who had suggested to her mistress about the headscarf and pushed her, but she had thought that it would be better and right this way. Everyone is sick of it. The girl can't take it anymore. She urgently needs a quiet corner where she can be alone with her thoughts. Layla climbed into the carriage. The coachman extended his hand to her and clarified that this was the Duke's carriage and that he had orders. "It's okay. This idiot will find himself another carriage. This crew is not the only one. Even his lazy brain should be able to cope with this task." The coachman nodded, in which case they would leave immediately. Let the coachman take the main character to some quiet and peaceful place. She needs to breathe. The beautiful carriage has moved off. The main character sat all alone in the carriage and held in her hands her box with a gift for Philin. What a fool. The girl pricked her hands while embroidering this napkin, and whatever she hoped for, everything was expected. Once again, the heroine hoped for the right reaction from her fiancé. What naivety. She understood everything perfectly well. Layla was completely dejected and exhausted. She kept blaming herself for another stupidity when she had already learned to be wise. Cecile was already playing her part and apologized in a squeaky, lying tone. All these problems were because of her. Philin suggested sending servants for a doctor. Since his mistress had experienced such severe stress, the brat shook her head. Just let her beloved Duke be with the girl. His presence is the best medicine for her, of course. Phil was so angry at Layla, defending his mistress, of course. How can she be such an ungrateful bitch? Layla has always been proud. If something threatens her authority, she becomes furious, and this has only worsened with age. But Cecile doesn't need anyone's recognition at all, as long as everything is okay with her beloved child. The mistress has nothing to worry about. Her child will be included in the family tree as the firstborn, and Layla will take care of him as an adoptive mother. And if his harmful duchess does not take good care of her child, Phelan did not understand. Layla said something about this to her mistress. That's not the point at all. Cecile squeezed out a new stream of tears and covered her mouth with her hand. It's just that after today, Cecile is afraid that this witch will hurt her child. Caring for the Duke's children will be the Duchess's responsibility. And if suddenly the vaunted Layla cannot fulfill her obligations, then it means that there is simply no place for her in this estate. This is exactly what his mistress needed to hear. What a driven ass Phil is. Cecile will quickly deal with him. I wish the child would be born soon. The Duke is sure that he will be a wonderful father. The mistress laughed. Meanwhile, in the shade of a tree, Layla was lamenting that she would never truly become part of this estate, that she would forever remain a stranger and unnecessary. The girl was distracted by some sharp sound. Layla raised her head. A white scarf hung in front of her face. In front of the heroine stood that same impeccable young man from the fairy tale. Why is the lady sitting here all alone and crying? This is the same savior with blue hair. What is he doing here? How did he find her, and was he even looking for her? The mysterious young man from the square who saved the girl herself and punished that vile moneylender. Layla thought about him ever since. The girl immediately realized that she was crying, and the charming savior saw this. She needed to quickly get herself in order. Layla reached her thin fingers to her eyes to wipe away the remnants of past sadness and resentment, but her hand was intercepted by the young man, after which the blue-haired handsome man carefully wiped away the tears with his soft handkerchief. You should be careful with your eyes. The main character accepted the mysterious nobleman's handkerchief and embarrassedly whispered that she would handle the rest herself. A handsome and noble young man sat down next to the girl on the grass. It was so quiet here. Layla liked to be alone. Not exactly, it was just necessary now. The guy asked, puzzled, what had upset such a beautiful young lady so much. Nothing special. Layla giggled incredulously. If she told the young man he would help her, the stranger replied that he would do everything he could for this. The heroine sighed resignedly. She was grateful to the young man for his kind words. She looked sad, but lost her former strength. In fact, the stranger was indeed ready to help with whatever was needed. He said this not at all for the sake of consolation. Layla felt very awkward meeting the noble, handsome man in such a place and under such circumstances. The heroine began to study her companion. The handle of his sword was badly scratched and worn. It was clearly not for beauty. The young man knows how to fight. Come to think of it, her fiancé's sword handle was also worn out, but Phelan had fought through the entire war to defend his empire. The girl's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of a mysterious interlocutor. The young man brought his fingers to Layla's lips. The young man put something sweet in Layla's mouth. The girl immediately jumped back. What was that anyway? Wait a minute. The heroine tasted what the guy slipped her. It can't be. Those were her favorite strawberry candies. The guy always eats them when he feels sad and melancholy. His charming companion also hopes that the sweets will at least slightly heal the soul of his exhausted interlocutor. Layla was very touched by such care and attention. The heroine thanked the young man for his concern. He is happy about it. Let the girl not worry, by the way. What a cute box the girl has with her. The main character had already forgotten about her unfortunate creation, which cost her another humiliation today. Layla began waving her hands, trying to come up with an answer, her cheeks blushing, just not this scarf. Layla touched the box with her left hand. Its lid opened, and the scarf she had embroidered fell out right onto the grass next to him. Just not that. Layla wanted to hide it, not put it on display. She simply couldn't stand another assessment of her work. The heroine turned completely red and began to make excuses. Layla reached for a handkerchief, but the young man intercepted it. The charming guy began to examine the girl's creation, a fairly simple work and execution, and the coat of arms was embroidered for Lady Tebesa's fiancé, apparently. No, the girl was going to throw it away, so let her get this disgrace back. Why throw away such a good scarf? Layla embroidered it with her own hands. How can you neglect it like that? Because no one needs her efforts anymore. She got a painful slap in the face because of it and doesn't want any more. Here, the mysterious stranger saw numerous cuts on the girl's hands. She tried so desperately. The young man would never allow the scarf into which so much had been invested to be thrown away. Let Layla give it to her interlocutor. What nonsense! The scarf didn't work out at all. Why would the young man need it? How could it not work out? Layla tried so hard on it. But the embroidery was not a success at all. It was clumsy and uneven. This is a real disgrace for a lady. And the handsome young man really likes this embroidery, and it is truly worth the price. It can't be that someone would like such bad taste. The young man isn't lying. Beauty is not always recognized with the eyes. Then the charming young man took the girl's hand in his and admired the red marks of her efforts. After which the stranger softly and sensually kissed Layla's hand, and the girl was stunned. Let the lady not judge him by his appearance. In fact, the guy is not an idiot at all. He knows perfectly well the difference between the price and the value of things. The main character didn't think anything like that about her savior. On the contrary, she was increasingly amazed by him. He was simply an incredible young man. The blue-haired gentleman hid Layla's handkerchief in the breast pocket of his luxurious jacket, with a warm smile on his face. Layla was very ashamed of her mistake. She was going to throw away the object of her failure anyway. Let her scarf, after so much suffering, serve someone who really needs it. By the way, the stunning lady still had questions that the young man would like to hear answers to. The stranger can't figure out his taxes and really hopes for the lady's help, but it would be better to contact the official responsible for this. The interlocutor did so, but the responsible official did not say anything sensible at all. He asks the lady to help with what the civil servant could not cope with. What an amazing young man this is! Layla really doesn't know if she could be of any use to him in such a matter. Even if the main character doesn't even care about this, the guy just wanted to hear her opinion. The young man told about his problem. He and Layla had a long and fascinating chat. They both enjoyed spending time like that. The girl helped the mysterious young man a lot. The lady felt very warm and pleasant in her soul. She had never experienced anything like this before. The young man also noted that the conversation was incredibly interesting for him, and his interlocutor was simply wonderful. By the way, about the handsome young man, the main character still doesn't know his name and what family he's from. His name? The young man narrowed his eyes slyly, which meant the lady was interested in it after all. The girl nodded approvingly. Well, since Layla Tabessa is interested in his name, then let the girl try to guess what his name is. The stranger guessed her name. Now it was the girl's turn, but that's not how it works. What a sly one. Okay, you need to try to remember all the noble families. The young man will not give up anyway. Maybe it was Lord Valas in front of her? No. Lord Eliza or Lord Logan? No, those were all families with people her age. The handsome young man with blue hair rather dismissed each of the girl's answers. She was sure that she would guess. But who then is in front of her? Layla listed every noble family, every peer from the family dynasties. The main character pouted amusingly. This is not fair at all. The girl demands a hint in such a case. Well, since the lady insists on help, so be it. The clue is the head of a handsome young man. Come on, blue hair, locks of sky blue. Layla sat stone-faced, and how his really beautiful hair should have helped her. The young man realized that the girl really didn't understand him. He laughed good-naturedly. He didn't think that such a miss could be ignorant about something. A spark of excitement lit up the young man's eyes. He offers Layla to find out who he is before the imperial ball, which means the guy will definitely be there. However, this is what is surprising. Absolutely everyone who is not below the title of Baron will be at the main event of the year. Imperial Banquet. Layla immediately returned to bad memories, terrible humiliations, and her hated duties. The girl sighed heavily. The young man immediately caught the painful notes in her sigh. The stranger was clearly worried about her. Doesn't a lady want to go to such a solemn event for the whole empire? Every lady dreams of this. There was no point in denying it. The young man understood everything anyway, and it was really easy and simple to communicate with him.
Will her interlocutors find out the reasons for such an unusual attitude towards the imperial ball? At the ball there will be nothing but dirty gossip about her and her idiot.
After the scandal at the Williot estate, the Duke would hardly think of taking his mistress's scarf to the imperial ball. But Layla won't be able to give him her crooked scarf either. It's now in the possession of her stranger, and she didn't want to give it to him in the first place. If an engaged duke appears at his first banquet without a headscarf, it will certainly become the main topic of conversation. The girl was exhausted. She was already tired of constantly worrying and receiving only dirt in response. Layla began to nervously bite her lips. Here, the young man's hand touched her lips. Why was the lady punishing her lips like that? The incredible young man was so close. Layla immediately jumped away from the stranger with blue hair, who was unacceptably close. He apologized and did not want to embarrass her. The young man immediately retreated. He was simply afraid that Layla would bite her lip from worry. He did not want to get into an awkward position. The girl felt very strange and pleased at heart. The young man had nothing to apologize for. This would be the lady's first appearance in public. She was worried. Because of the difficult war, for many this will be the first time. The debut was expected by many, but not many have what Layla has. She certainly shouldn't worry about such trifles. The lady has everything she needs to shine at the imperial ball. The young man is very charming and gallant, a real gentleman, and is probably popular with the ladies, you could say that. But the stranger is not interested at all. The young man is not trying to get the lady's attention at all. That's how it is. Layla was amused by this. It was very strange. In a conversation with a girl, he spoke about female attention, as if she was not a lady at all. It feels like he treats the main character as an equal, because that's how it was, even though she didn't believe it yet. The young man stood up and began to walk across the field. The young man was sure that he needed this scarf, and had the girl changed her mind about giving it to him? Not at all. But this scarf has the coat of arms of the Williot family embroidered on it, and no one can see it. Otherwise, there will be trouble. Layla was worried about this, but her interlocutor assured her that the girl had absolutely nothing to worry about. A handsome and stately young man flew up to the girl's ear and jokingly said that he would hide it very securely like a treasure. The main character immediately recoiled, as the stranger was once again impermissibly close to her. Layla is grateful that the guy won't show it to anyone. How unusual it is after all. The main character was called out. It was time for her to return. Otherwise, it would be very indecent, and the Duke would be angry. Here, the girl's mysterious companion barely touched her thin fingertips with his hand. The young man asks permission to ask one last question for the day. Was it really about taxes again? They had already discussed so much. No, the stranger was interested in whether the girl had ever thought about government service. Layla simply froze in amazement. The guy seriously valued her skills and knowledge and was confident that she could handle such work. Does the young man really think that Lady Tabesa will be taken into the civil service of the emperor? That is exactly what her interlocutor thinks. Layla laughed. Women weren't hired for such positions, but she was pleased with his faith in her abilities. But there was no such law. So the issue here is not about laws at all, but about ingrained traditions, stupid stereotypes, and the vulnerability of male dignity. And if suddenly the main character had such an opportunity, she would want to take advantage of it. Layla immediately blurted out her answer, of course. She loves her job very much. It is pleasant and interesting to her. It would be an outlet for her. The young man stretched out into a kind and mysterious smile. He heard what he wanted and hoped that Layla would not forget this conversation. At the desk, behind a pile of documents and books, sat a young man in glasses, diligently filling out something. The sounds of approaching footsteps were heard behind the door. The young man immediately jumped up from his seat and angrily said, "You finally arrived." He buried the poor guy in work, while he himself was walking and enjoying the beautiful weather. The words of indignation were addressed to the main character's mysterious stranger. The young man adjusted his glasses and added in a businesslike tone that Emperor Kilian de Zeppel Uzavildia should not stir up the people before the ball. The charming emperor majestically approached the desk and took one of the documents. The young man had already figured it out, right? The bespectacled youth glared at his master with a stony gaze. His Highness was joking now. Kilian laughed. Well, of course. The performer is terribly tired. The emperor apparently wants him to die right here at his desk from overwork. No way. Kilian Zemmel approached the young man and smiled. The servant knew very well how much the emperor valued him. The boy at the table was completely dejected and lowered his head onto the desk. He begged the emperor to lead him. Never and under no circumstances. Then let the emperor hire someone else. The young man doesn't have time, but the emperor trusts only him alone. The performer was already thinking about betraying the emperor in order to rest in prison for the rest of his life, but there is good news for the performer. His Majesty Zeppel has found a very worthy candidate and will soon hire a competent and worthy assistant for the young man." The performer immediately jumped up from his chair. "It can't be. The Emperor will really hire him." Killian nodded approvingly. Then the Emperor could hire 3 performers at once, and then they would live well. But the Emperor replied that they could hire no one at all. "Well, one is one," the performer agrees. "Who else was so unlucky besides himself?" Then the civil servant will ask for letters of recommendation in the morning, but this is not required. The Emperor will arrange an exam. There is an administrative exam in the empire, but it is rarely held, since government positions are filled based on personal recommendations or graduates of prestigious institutions. But even if the emperor suddenly decides to conduct such an administrative exam, it is unlikely that anything will change. The emperor was going to hold the exam in a month. There is little time, but they will manage, even if there are still taxes, politics, and welfare. Emperor Killian's personal assistant should be able to understand all of these areas. The young man opened his mouth. "Great. The bespectacled boy will never have an assistant, and he will die here. He will announce the exam after the imperial banquet." The emperor smiled predatorily and said that it would be necessary to make it known that women could also apply for this position. So the most anticipated day for the empire has arrived. The day of the coronation and the imperial ball has arrived. Everyone has been preparing since the morning. The main character tried not to give in to the general race and enjoy the solitude. The holiday will last 2 days, the first for everyone. And tomorrow there will be a celebration only for the male half of the population. Someday this rotten system will change. Layla clenched her fist in the hot water, just needing to get through today, then slowly opened her hand. But will the girl cope with the general pressure? After the last scandal, she and the Duke have become completely distant from each other. Previously, the guys could chat calmly, but now the future spouses didn't even say a word, in case it would be the same at the banquet. The personal maid dressed her mistress. This dress suits Layla incredibly. The silver color highlights her dark, night-like hair. The main character really shone. She was incredibly beautiful. The dress was her perfect complement. Of course, compliments were part of the service staff's job, but the dress really did suit the girl perfectly. Wonderfully tailored to the girl's delicate figure, the fabric is incredibly pleasant. I'll have to thank the tailor after the imperial ball. Layla was seated at the vanity table. Her wonderful curls still needed to be tidied up, and some cosmetics added. In front of the main character on the vanity table lay a multitude of jars with blush, eyeshadow, powder, as well as her jewelry. All preparations were completed. The Duke was already waiting for his future wife in the lobby. It was time to go out. They had to leave for the imperial ball right now if House Williot didn't want them to be late for their debut. Before the main character had time to leave her room and enjoy the beautiful image, a glass of wine was poured on her. The maids ran to their mistress in horror. What a street wretch! Layla's dress was ruined. Michelle was almost crying. What should they all do now? The imperial ball was about to start. There was no time at all. Opposite Layla stood a nasty servant. She was so sorry. She was just hurrying to her room and didn't notice Layla. The impudent and lying brat bowed before the main character. She didn't want it to turn out this way at all. Layla could destroy the fake cheap stuff with a click. It was all too obvious. Even the Duke would understand what was what. But the girl was always strong, and this scoundrel is one of the most cowardly, envious, and weak creatures in her life. Touching her is like poking a stick into garbage that is rotting on its own. The problem needed to be solved, and there was almost no time. How many dresses did the maids take with them? Is there any silver one? After all, this is an imperial reception. We need to sort this out quickly. We can't be late. There was another silver dress. So be it. There was no time left to choose jewelry, and the makeup was specifically for this shade. Plus, she and the Duke had to wear matching suits. Let the maids quickly bring a similar dress and take with them the rest of the shoes and jewelry, just in case. The main character asked to tell the butler that Phelan should leave for the imperial bath without Layla. Layla was used to difficult conditions, constant pressure, and emergency situations. She could not be swayed by such nonsense to spite a cheap actress. Here is the majestic palace of His Imperial Majesty, where the most important banquets and people for the country are received. On the most important holiday of the year for the Empire, carriages crowded outside the royal palace. Guests arrived from all over. The great Emperor Killian Zamel was informed that Duke Williot had already arrived at his palace and that he had arrived alone. The emperor jumped up from his seat like this one. Where is this idiot's bride? Killian needs her. The personal assistant looked out the window and reported everything to his lordship. Layla did not want to go, but had to show up anyway. On the street, only the Duke himself emerged from the Williott's carriage without his future wife. Wasn't this idiot really a pain in the ass? No, there was definitely something wrong here. Killian Zeppel ordered his assistant Bear to postpone the start of the banquet. The Emperor senses Layla. She will definitely be here. Layla Tebessa. Everyone in high society knew this name, although no one had ever seen the girl herself. The main character was not a celebrity. There were various rumors about how this provincial girl appeared in the noble family of the Duke. No one knew what this lady had done, but the Duke and Duchess loved her madly, and some even considered Layla their illegitimate daughter because of this. However, the famous Duke and Duchess left this world, suddenly dying in a terrible accident, and Phelan became the head of the family. And then, sensing a weak link in the form of the brainless Gar manager, everyone, like vultures, pounced on the Williot estate. There were a lot of attempts, threats. It was strange that such events were not advertised anywhere. Instead of shrinking, the girl not only defended the estate, but also made it one of the richest. And it was at this moment that the young Emperor Killian Zeppel became interested in the Williot family clan. Killian knew the Duke's son personally to his misfortune, and even in his youth it was clear that he was not very smart, or rather, he was a complete idiot. Therefore, when the head of the Williot clan was gone, no one doubted the collapse of their house. What kind of magical assistant coped with such unthinkable oppression? The Emperor was obliged to sort out the affairs of the Williots, since the work of this assistant was simply fantastic, and so it turned out that the house was not run by this idiot. And not even the incredibly gifted assistant who remained in the Duke's memory, but a young lady who had barely reached adulthood. And the name of this incredible girl was Layla Tebessa, and that is how the future emperor first learned this name. After so many years of successful and bloody war, the magical girl faded into the background, but then he met Layla in the square. The emperor immediately guessed who was standing in front of him. He was delighted with Layla, and such a lady is forced to tolerate such a cretin. She must be allowed to spread her wings. Faithful and devoted Bear hurried his master. The start of the banquet could no longer be delayed. The emperor asked if the idiot Williot was still attending the imperial banquet alone. His assistant nodded. Lady Tebessa, who Killian Zeppel was waiting for, had not yet arrived. The emperor was a man of outstanding intelligence and insight. Layla would never have missed the imperial ball because of some quarrels and whims. What happened to her? The emperor devoted all his thoughts to the amazing girl. He didn't care about anyone. Let the world wait. The beginning is postponed. He is waiting for his lady. Bear's glasses almost cracked when his master said something that was unheard of. Killian Zeppel is the emperor. The very girl he is waiting for personally has not arrived yet, so the rest will wait as well as their ruler. Meanwhile, the main character was already riding in a carriage towards the imperial ball to the new emperor, suspecting nothing. The girl solved all the problems as quickly as possible, but she still failed to arrive on time. The stunningly beautiful Layla stepped out of the carriage. Phelan would be furious despite the fact that it was his cheap mistress's fault. The banquet has already begun, it is not permissible, and has no excuse for the emperor to appear late. Here is her first debut. Therefore, once again the girl will have to take all the attacks on herself, and thus cover the Duke's honor. The majestic palace of the emperor towered before the main character, and the girl trembled inside. Layla hurried up the stairs. Strange, if the imperial banquet had already begun, the doors inside would already be closed. The girl couldn't even imagine that they were all waiting for her. Had the celebration really begun? But what happened then? All the guests were radiant with luxury and manners. The ladies were in stunning dresses. Their gentlemen gallantly accompanied them into the hall. Layla simply beamed with admiration. Even in her fantasies, everything was much poorer, just delight. The main character's fiancé immediately appeared behind her, a moron, which is why Layla allowed herself to be so happy. The girl at least understands what the consequences of her behavior could have been for him, and what she came in anyway. Of course, the main character could have told everything about his fake servant, but Layla was simply tired of the constant clarifications. The girl took a deep breath and simply apologized without any explanation or reasons. It was easier that way. Then Layla's eyes fell on the embroidered handkerchief in her fiancé's pocket. Had he really dared to take it from Cecile? The scarf was shabby. It was embroidered by Mother Felena. If he had come without a scarf, they would have started spreading rumors about both of them. Layla's hardness and coldness immediately evaporated when it came to her beloved Duchess of Wiliot. The scarf was embroidered by her beloved adoptive mother, with her golden and gentle hands. How the girl misses her presence, participation in life, tender looks and warm words. She misses her very much. Phylan crossed his arms in front of himself. Layla was unhappy again. Why did she suddenly freeze? No way. The main character simply remembered the Duchess, and her heart felt heavy. She misses her very much. Phil was not particularly touched by Layla's nostalgia. He had always been jealous of his parents because of their relationship with her. The girl extended her hand to her future husband. Why hasn't the banquet started yet? The Emperor is late. Layla began to think that for some reason unknown to her, the Emperor had saved her position in society. She had made it to his banquet and had been saved from judgment. The musicians blew their trumpets, the honored guests were thanked for their noble patience, and all the guests were immediately inspired. Crowds of noble aristocrats, rich heirs, and young debutantes rushed towards the stage. His Majesty Emperor Kilian Zepel Yuzavildia is pleased to welcome his esteemed guests to his celebration. Layla froze in mute shock. It couldn't be. Her savior was the Emperor himself. That's the kind of ignorance we were talking about then. How could Layla be so stupid if you think about it? The symbol of the imperial family is a blue dragon. That's why they have blue hair and blue eyes. The Emperor gave such a frank hint then. How stupid it was. His debut never took place because of the protracted war. It's simply a shame not to recognize the Emperor himself, and what about Layla's debut? It couldn't have been worse. The Emperor was dazzling, stately, confident with a cold grandeur and an attentive gaze. Everyone was enchanted by him. Layla also admired her savior. Like everyone else, she knew him much better than the others. His soul was no less beautiful than his appearance. Lady Tebessa began to be roughly pushed by her fiancé, which suddenly made the girl stare at the Emperor and freeze. The girl looked away in embarrassment. Her cheeks were burning and her eyes were shining, but nothing special. Phil frowned. The Duke wanted to know something else from the girl. Phelan immediately turned away from the bride with displeasure. He didn't want anything. The main character saw that Phil was childishly pouting and crossing his arms. Why was he suddenly angry with her? Meanwhile, the charming savior, who turned out to be the Emperor himself, was getting closer and closer to the girl. Kilian Zemmel thanked the guests for each of them being able to give him their precious time and support him on this day. The Emperor ordered the guests to raise their glasses. A great day and a great occasion. Long live the Cardan Empire. All the invited guests raised their glasses and supported their Emperor. Long live the Cardan Empire. Live music started playing. The performers were incredibly dedicated to their work. The sounds of their instruments made everyone's head spin. As was traditional, members of the royal family were the first to open the imperial ball with their dance, after which Duke Wiliot extended his hand to his bride and invited her to dance. Layla never liked dancing. But to her deepest regret, the young people needed to show that they were doing well. Layla tried desperately to remember her fleeting dance lessons. A step left, a step right, a turn. The girl moved mechanically and stepped on all her fiancé's feet. Phil laughed. Layla never knew how to dance. The main character once again deliberately stepped on this idiot's foot. He himself is not a particularly enviable dancer. The Duke leaned very close to the lady, but her fiancé knows how to lead. Layla turned away in disgust. You know how to lead your horse, but not the lady. Wiliot considered himself unsurpassed. Layla rolled her eyes. The groom, by the way, likes her new dress. The main character was surprised. What kind words and compliments? Apparently the Duke's glass was empty. It is clear that his bride prepared for a long time for their first joint debut. In fact, this is not the original dress. The Duke didn't even bother to remember that they had prepared paired silver icons. Wiliot thought, did he say something wrong? He is always very attentive. Why is Layla looking at him like that? A nobleman approached the young couple and greeted Duke Wiliot, whose stupidity everyone had already heard about. It was so good that this idiot was distracted by conversation. His closeness was already unbearable. I needed to breathe. But Layla's saving union was interrupted by a female voice, Lady Tabisu calling out to Marquis Maris. Layla was surprised that the noble person knew the main character by name. Why was this suddenly interesting? Another noble person with pink hair immediately ran up to Marquise Marisa. What are the lovely ladies chatting about here? The girl so wanted to be alone. Lady Tebessa is simply an incredible beauty, elegance worthy of a duchess. And when she and the Duke get married, the war is over. They need to hurry up and give birth to a bunch of children, and then an unpleasant lady intervened. Is it important for Layla to take care of offspring when her Duke already has an heir, and here is the spawn of hell itself, Countess Brisantina? Sophia Brisantina, or before the wedding of Hadlin, when she was a candidate for the bride of Feline along with Layla. At that time, everyone was simply sure that the Duke and Duchess would choose Miss Sophia, and the Countess herself believed so. As the spoiled brat was told that she wasn't chosen, she slapped Layla in the face, accusing her of cheating. After all, how else could the Williot family have chosen Layla instead of the brilliant Sophia? It was Tebessa who set it all up. Countess Brisantina gravely insulted Layla, accusing her of cheating instead of admitting a justified defeat. But no one ever found out about the vile behavior of the pathetic, envious woman, since her father paid a lot for the silence of the Williot family. Money is more important than a stubborn, albeit beloved daughter. Sophia married Count Brizantin, and here comes the fatal meeting. The ladies advised Sophia to think before opening her mouth. Let these hens think. Everyone here knows that the Duke has a child, and he values its mother very much. Moreover, the mistress is Princess Muslis, who is, after all, pure-blooded, unlike Lady Tebessa. Sophia openly humiliated Dela for being the illegitimate child of Count Tebessa, and it seemed everyone thought the same. Sophia Brisantina smiled sarcastically. Had she really touched a nerve? To do that, you need to at least be something. Layla parried perfectly. She is a countess, after all, not a former princess of an overthrown kingdom. Without her country, she is nobody. The past is not important. Only the future matters, and in that future, Layla will become a duchess, and the princess and Miss Sophia will remain nobodies for the rest of their miserable days. All the ladies froze. Everyone felt a core in the future duchess that could not be bent, and now Layla needs to be alone, because no one objects. Every noble lady was delighted with the girl's fortitude and confident turn of speech, but Sophia was simply seething with anger. The main character almost ran out onto the balcony. Fresh, cool air was what she needed right now. Solitude, silence, and tranquility. How good, Layla's first debut. What a day, and what else is to come. If the envious scoundrel speaks so ignorantly to her face, then what she says behind her back is scary to think about. How tired the heroine is. It would be better if she sat with her favorite papers. Layla wants to return home as soon as possible. A familiar, pleasant male voice was heard behind Lady Tebessa. The banquet had just begun, and Layla already wanted to leave. And here is His Imperial Highness. His eyes rejoiced at the sight of the long-awaited guest, and Layla did not even know how to justify herself. Lady Layla Tebessa greets the son of the great empire. The girl bows low. It was terribly formal and cold, which was why Killian didn't want to tell her anything, but it was simply impossible to hide something like that. The young man smiled kindly as his name was His Highness Killian Zepel Yuzavildia. A very precise answer. The Emperor did not expect anything else from the brilliant Layla. Since everything was cleared up, we could switch to informal terms. As his lordship pleases. So what does the girl do here alone in the midst of the holiday, just breathing the air? Well, the banquet is indeed very stuffy. There are a lot of people. Everyone is pestering you with conversations and questions. Lush clothes. Is it really comfortable for a girl to stand like this in such shoes? Layla nodded modestly. This damn etiquette. The Emperor gently held the girl's hand and sat her down on the bench. Let her stop torturing herself. This can't be done. Why should Lady Tebessa stand when there is somewhere to sit? The Emperor does not want Layla to be uncomfortable. The main character was shocked, but the Emperor himself was standing. How could she sit? But Killian wasn't wearing heels, so he would sit too. How kind and sympathetic Killian is. He is simply incredible, and Layla behaved so terribly. The Emperor tried to talk to the deflated girl, like Layla's banquet. Just amazing. The lady thanks. Killian chuckled. Layla doesn't know how to lie at all. That's good. The guy can see that she's been bored here for a long time. To tell the truth, Killian is also tired of it here. It's much more pleasant to bury his head in documents. The main character agrees with him. Layla froze. Killian was incredibly handsome, especially in the rays of the silver moon. The emperor seemed to read her thoughts and did not like banquets. It felt like they were kindred spirits and could talk about absolutely everything. "Why is the girl looking at the emperor like that?" Layla apologized. "It's not necessary, he's just curious why." The main character really wanted to talk to him freely and felt that Killian would support her. So the emperor has something on his face. Before the reception, the young man allowed himself to eat a piece of cake. That's not the point, not at all. So today the emperor looks worse than usual. His hair is not hanging right. It's all because of Bear's glasses. The heroine began to laugh. Such a serious look and such funny assumptions. Killian is simply wonderful. The emperor noticed that the girl was singing loudly. For the first time in a long time, she felt so good. Layla caught his gaze. She apologized for her rudeness. She didn't want to offend Killian. The young man smiled. Killian really enjoys seeing Layla smile, and if that means talking nonsense, he's at her service. The main character blushed. Well, here again Killian was making fun of her, and the guy didn't understand, no way. The emperor says what he thinks, and often Killian says the same to other people. Layla looked at him suspiciously. His Highness only speaks like that to those he likes. The main character opened her mouth in surprise, which means the emperor likes Layla. Of course, he likes the girl. How could it be otherwise? But everyone told Layla that she was worthless. She didn't believe it and wanted to know why. Does sympathy really need a reason? And doesn't such a deep feeling require justification or explanation? Let the girl give an example. Layla answered that usually young men love ladies for their beauty or intelligence. The main character wants to say that she is beautiful and smart. Not at all. Lady Tebessa was ready to fall through the ground. The emperor was simply delighted. The girl was touching, and she herself probably still doesn't understand what she's really worth. And Killian Zeppel loves to make real, pure, and rare diamonds from uncut diamonds. One of His Highness's servants appeared on the balcony and announced that they were already waiting for Killian. It was time for him to go. The emperor looked towards the imperial banquet with regret. He really didn't like all these celebrations. Killian took a deep breath, but there was nothing he could do. He had obligations and responsibilities, no matter how much he wanted to stay with her. The main character realized that the emperor would now be returning to the banquet hall according to etiquette. She should see him off. Layla quickly jumped up from her seat, twisted her leg and fell, but before she fell, a worried Killian managed to catch her. Lady Tebessa was not hurt, she was fine. Again the young man. A dream saved Layla's situation. She apologized to him. The emperor gently returned the girl to her original position. Usually they just say, "Thank you," not apologize. Maybe it would be worth sending the servants for a doctor. The girl's ankle was not in the best condition after all. It wasn't worth it. Well, Killian was very glad that nothing bad happened to the girl. It was time for him to go. The emperor began to retreat to the banquet hall, but could not help but cast a last glance at the main character. Layla sighed bitterly, but he was so generous and amazing. It was just some kind of magic. Then the sounds of heavy approaching footsteps were heard near the balcony. Layla froze. And the main character's hated fiancé decided to join her. His face clearly did not radiate joy. Phylon approached his bride furiously. A dull anger blazed in her eyes. Layla took a step back. Then the Duke brazenly and painfully grabbed his bride. How dare she cheat on him, her man? Layla was simply shocked by what this idiot was even saying. And most importantly, who is even talking about cheating here? Are they completely out of their minds or something? The girl immediately came to her senses and looked menacingly at Phylon. He drank too much wine at the banquet. Let him finally start thinking. Phylon began to shake his bride angrily. He couldn't believe that Layla had an affair in such a place. Enough of this disgrace. Layla couldn't stand it and hit the cretin on the hands. One more word and the result would be irreversible. Let him shut his mouth immediately. Let him not even try to deny it. Phil saw everything with his own eyes. The two of them with the emperor. Layla communicated with His Highness. What next? I was talking to the emperor, and these two were actually shamelessly hugging on the balcony. What a moron! The main character twisted her ankle, and Killian caught her. Phil has to believe it. She was smiling at him. And how should a girl behave in the presence of the emperor? Cry or dance? Let the expert tell. He is so smart. But Layla didn't laugh like that with the Duke, with her fiancé. So why would Layla suddenly laugh with an idiot? This bastard has no conscience at all. He wants Layla to smile after he humiliated and betrayed her so much. And how the Duke acted, the main character forgets every time who she is talking to. It's simply useless. His fiancée is probably angry again because of Cecile. Philaine is sure of it, because it is so. Why is the girl still angry? Phil already explained that the Duke only cares about his child, and his mistress will be sent away immediately. Layla doesn't believe him at all. He's a fool and a liar to boot. And why doesn't she believe her fiancé Phil is constantly following the fake? He hasn't cared about Layla for a long time. But Cecile can't cope alone. She has a bunch of servants and is simply pregnant. And Layla can cope with everything that even strong men can't cope with. Let the Duke finally answer honestly and in good conscience. Is he going to marry Layla, or is the Duchess's place already secured for Cecile? It looks very much like the second option. Layla doesn't believe Phelan's words at all. Let him prove it if he's really serious. The main character would like to offer to throw this scoundrel out, but there was a child inside her, and he did not choose his parents and would hardly have chosen these two if he had such an opportunity. Well, if the bride so wants the Duke to prove his seriousness, so be it. Phelan grabbed Layla by the hand and dragged her along with him. The heroine tried to stop this idiocy. There were people around. The couple was heading straight to the Emperor. The cretin unceremoniously interrupted His Majesty's conversation. His interlocutors were simply dumbfounded with horror. Killian looked at the boor with contempt. Then the Emperor broke into a smile. "The famous Duke of Wiliot, what happened?" Phil replied that he needed his permission. The Duke asks the Emperor to bless the Duke's marriage to Lady Tabesa. What is he doing? This is a disgrace. A meaningful silence hung in the banquet hall. Everyone knew that the Duke was not a very bright person, but if you look for such an idiot, you won't find him. The Emperor cannot give his permission for the marriage and does not want to. This cretin has just disgraced himself in front of the entire empire. We need to save Layla. The Duke demanded that the Emperor explain himself and state the reason for his decision, why Wiliot was refused. What an idiot. He's digging himself into the grave. The Emperor scratched his head. Does the eminent Duke really need to explain the reasons? The idiot immediately frowned. What a nasty thing. So the Emperor was with Layla. The girl immediately shut this imbecile up before he was put in prison. Of course, the Duke knows that when there is a great feast in the palace, all the nobility must postpone their feasts for 3 months. Phelan did not want to seem ignorant. Killian Zeppel folded his hands in front of him. Then why did Duke Wiliot ask then, since he knew about the rules? In order to get married within a year, they need to get permission as soon as possible. It is not known when the chance to ask for it will come. After all, it takes so much time to prepare for the wedding. The Emperor was touched by the main character. She was simply lovely. Layla giggled mockingly. Did the Duke really want to marry Layla so much that he was so quick to ask the king for permission? Phil nodded, playing along. Sweat was running down Phil's face. Why didn't anyone tell him about these rules? The main character sighed. This time she defended him. Next time he will figure it out himself. A whisper went through the crowd of guests. Apparently the Duke doted on his bride, so much so that he was in a hurry to get permission to marry. Everyone thought that the young people had problems, but still, the mistress is just a mistress, a smart girl. She saved the idiot and convinced everyone that everything was fine with the clan. The Emperor replied quite contentedly that the young couple should come to him in a month. He was too busy now. The Duke could be patient. Of course, Phil was pouting. He didn't like being made fun of. The Duke and his bride bowed to the Emperor and began to leave. The main character left, burning with shame, and out of the corner of her eye she looked for the Emperor's gaze. What a disgrace. The Emperor, in turn, saw off the fantastic girl with his own eyes. She must not be allowed to ruin her life. Bear must speed up the exam. The carriage of the Duchy of Villio set off towards the family estate. The imperial ball was over. The guests were leaving. Philaine had no expression. He was riding in his thoughts, if one could call it that, with an offended look. The Duke asked, offended, why his bride had not said that there were some rules, because everyone in this kingdom was obliged to know them from childhood, especially the Duke. It's shameful to even say this out loud. Phil himself should know and understand what children know on every street. Nothing of the sort. Layla simply decided to humiliate the Duke in front of the Emperor. What kind of nonsense is this cretin talking? How could she even know that the Duke was so stupid given the education that was put into him, what he had thought up? It was completely unclear. The girl does not read minds. If only she had given him some kind of sign. The vile little bastard. But she had once again covered him with herself and saved him. How the main character didn't want to listen to this cretin's nonsense, but without the title of Duchess, the girl would be nobody. The carriage drove up to the estate, its doors opened, and Phelan's maid was already running towards him. The mistress was clearly worried that after the imperial ball the relationship between her idiot and Layla would warm up. But there was no reason to worry. They still hated each other. Phelan adored everything that Cecile did, and she flattered him all the time. The Duke even allows this girl to leave the estate, which is completely unacceptable. Michelle carefully stocked up on food and hot tea for her mistress. She had no time to eat. Work awaited her. The hostess is exhausting herself again. She needs to worry about herself and take care of herself. This can't be done. She needs to have a snack. The girl has a lot of work. But the main character didn't even have lunch because she was seeing the Duke off. The vile mistress appeared in the doorway of Layla's room, and that was all she needed. The brat stammered her greeting to Lady Tebessa. The main character asked the maid to leave the room for a while. Cecile promised not to take up much of the main character's time. The maid offered to bring hot tea, but the girl refused. There was no need for politeness and hypocrisy, and she simply had no time. The mistress heard that they were already leaving next week, so would Lady Layla like to take a walk with her before leaving? The little brat began to make herself more comfortable on the sofa, because the capital is still the capital. There is such a large selection of everything here. Why else would this lying scum have planned something once again? Enough is enough. The last thing I need is a showdown with her now. Why does the mistress ask this question to the young lady? Well, Cecile really hoped that Layla would buy her something. Layla gave the liar a cold look. Why should this suddenly become interesting to her? Well, a mistress just needs children's things and toys. The main character immediately froze. Another dirty provocation. This scum can't live in peace. Cecile clarified what was wrong. Could it be that the mistress said something wrong? Because very soon her baby will be born? Why would Layla do this? How is that? The future Duchess will become a foster mother for her mistress's child. Wouldn't she want to take care of him? And since the former princess is no longer in her kingdom, she has no personal servants, so let Layla go. What a vile bitch, she called Layla her servant. Phil is a brainless fool, since he does not see her toxicity. Taking care of her child is still Layla's responsibility. Such feigned naivety in the eyes and gestures, and such ugliness inside, and the brat doesn't even hide her nature. The main character rolled her eyes. Stop pretending, stop provoking, get out of her office, let her go to her kennel. What exactly is Miss Tebessa talking about now? Another insult from the pathetic mistress. Stop addressing her with disrespect. A cheap girl is obliged to address her mistress as a lady, nothing else. An impudent fool is not Heliot, she is simply nobody. The girl immediately jumped up from her place and clenched her fists. No matter what anyone said, she was still a princess. She was once a princess in a defeated state. Now her lover is an ordinary commoner without a title or surname. A low-class reptile is treated politely only because she is carrying a duke's child under her heart. Until the nasty snake gives birth, the main character will be polite to her, so while she is still here, let her not get underfoot, which means while she is still here. What's the matter? Didn't Phelan explain to his little pet that as soon as his mistress gave birth to his child, he would throw her out into the street? Yes, the mistress really doesn't know. She was counting on staying and taking everything into her hands. How funny. Let her not worry about the child. Layla will never hurt him. So let her not fill her head with more plans for humiliation. She doesn't have much time left. The mistress flew out of the office. The main character even held the door of the impudent bitch, came here to humiliate her and express her desire for this house. Funny. Everything was fine with the mistress. A maid came into her room. The heroine felt fine but did not like being distracted. Layla grabbed her head. The girl asked to clean the sofa on which the rubbish was sitting. She needed rest. The heroine diligently rubbed her temples, massaged her neck and head, but nothing helped her concentrate. In such cases, sleep helped the main character well. She just needed to take a nap, but not for long. The girl dozed off, sitting upright in her chair, surrounded by her work documents. Layla opened her eyes abruptly and jumped in surprise, awakened by the loud slam of her door. What the hell? This idiot bursts into her room so unceremoniously, without even thinking about decency. What's wrong with the main character? Why is she so cold and angry? How could she do that at all? Again, he was talking about his mistress. Why did the girl dare to threaten her? Phelan hit his head. Why would she suddenly do such a thing? But the Duke did not calm down. How could he behave like that with his mistress? Layla has no heart at all. This bitch no longer has a title but treats the heroine like a servant. The mistress has designated her real place, and that she is here only until the birth, which is not so. The mistress just lost her country, and the evil Layla dares to say such things. You can't be such a donkey. She tried to humiliate the heroine on purpose. To top it all off, it was Duke Williot, the owner of the family estate and head of the clan, who had to tell her everything. So the great head of the family told his mistress that this was indeed so, and the bastard would get out of here. The idiot hesitated. This is precisely why the main character announced the Duke's decision, since he himself is simply not capable of it. Who does Tebesa think she is here? In fact, the girl is the Duke's fiancée, so she acts like a mistress. The main character is indeed the bride of Duke Willet, but she has not yet become his legal wife. Apparently, over all these years that the girl spent here, she had formed a false impression. Layla Tebesa hasn't become a duchess yet, so she shouldn't meddle in other people's business. She simply has no right to do so. Something inside the girl burst. Layla tried so hard for those who loved her like their own daughter. Layla has done more for the Williot Duchy than anyone has ever done or will ever do, and this cretin wants to throw her out for cheap. All the pleasant and warm memories from her childhood spent with the Duke were shattered into pieces. He never treated her properly and never will. The main character finally understood everything as it was in her situation. A decision was maturing on her face. She would not tolerate this anymore. Well, the girl understood everything. The Duke smiled triumphantly. Great. He hadn't counted on this anymore. From today on, Lady Tebesa will no longer work at the Williot estate or on behalf of the duchy. The girl mentally apologized to her adoptive parents. She just can't cope with this degenerate anymore. As the idiot said, the girl is just Lady Tebesa. She has no right to decide anything here. Phil didn't think she was so irresponsible. Let him repeat what he just blurted out. This is the work of the Duke, who shifted all responsibility onto the girl, and he himself is not even capable of choosing a jacket on his own. A pathetic and worthless fool, the concerns of Duchess Layla do not concern him. She is only the daughter of a count, so from now on he can get by on his own. Phelan growled angrily that it wouldn't change anything. He wouldn't apologize to her and beg her to stay. In no case does anyone expect gratitude and adequacy from the idiot anymore. He finally opened the girl's eyes. Layla slapped the Duke with his documents. Let him lose everything he has in a matter of days. Then maybe he will start to appreciate it. The main character had nothing more to say. She didn't really want to see that disgusting face either. It was time for her to go. Michelle brought another work letter for the lady on a silver tray, but the girl put her hand in front of her and shook her head. From now on, everything that has to do with work will fall into the hands of Duke Williot. He is now a great manager. From today on, Phil himself will handle all issues, so don't bother Layla with such things. Michelle began to ask about what happened with the Duke, but Layla asked to leave her alone for now. Meanwhile, there was a bustle in the study. The butler was handing over Lady Tebesa's documents to his Duke. That was all Layla asked me to tell this idiot, so that's how it is. What an evil girl. Does the heroine really think that the Duke understands anything about these papers? No one thinks so. Phil is not used to working and thinking. He read only a couple of sheets of paper with reports and was already tired. Why spend so much in the rainy season? This is a whole month of maintenance for the entire estate. Do they really spend this much every year? But this is idiocy. Layla is not as smart as everyone says, since she throws around so much money, such expenses, and just in vain. Maybe I should discuss this with Layla, but then the haughty lady will turn up her nose again. The villain will no longer look down on his master. Phelan will decide everything himself, and much better than the girl herself. It is necessary to verify the expenses, but how can we know that everything is correct? The papers of the Duke's father would be very useful now. The Duke rang his bell and called the butler. He needed the key to the library. Here, the young man, depressed by his work, was surrounded from behind by an annoying scoundrel, asking what her beloved and dear one was doing here for so long. Phelan was just looking at the estate documents. His mistress apologized for disturbing him. She just wanted to be with him after that conversation with Layla. The brat started acting out again. She felt so heavy and sad at heart, I had to tell her that. The idiot loved it when his mistress admired him and brazenly flattered him, so he allowed her to stay in his office, even though he had to work. Hatred work will wait for the Grand Duke and will not go away from him. The mistress is very happy about this. The butler brought his master the key to his father's library as he had asked him to. Even the servants looked down on him and his passion. Let the butler put the keys on his desk. Feline will take care of business later. The servant bowed his head and nodded. The little bastard began running through the lines of documents, trying to find the essence of the matter, preparation for the rainy season. How interesting that Cecile is already at such an impressive stage, but has not gained any weight, as is expected during pregnancy. If he hadn't been told that his mistress was pregnant, Williot would never have guessed. It was the pure truth. Let her stop lying. She had gotten so fat. Just a little bit and only her tummy, as his mistress manages to do, Cecile began to giggle. The mistress clung to the Duke. Well, she was ticklish. Cecile was afraid of tickling. What was he doing to her? The brat continued to study his papers from behind the Duke's back with a nervous look in the rainy season. You need to call the Archmage. Cecile gritted her teeth angrily. She already had her own plan from the beginning. Nothing should interfere with it. Can a mistress ask her beloved for something, but first let him promise to do it? Promising to fulfill your words without hearing exactly what you will need to do is somehow not right. But this request is about his child, so what is there to think about at all, right? Well then, okay, the Duke nodded. The mistress beamed. What a naive donkey. How easy it is to deal with him. The mistress began to voice her request. Meanwhile, the main character could not fall asleep. She had no idea what to do with her time. After all, Layla usually had practically no free time, but now she has a ton of it, things to do. Maybe she should read something from the new editions then. Yes, that's a great idea. We need to go to the library. Layla left her room and headed down the corridor to the butler. The heroine needed the key to the Duke's library. The servant apologized, but his lordship took the key and did not return it, but it should always be kept by the butler. All is true, however. Last evening, the master demanded that the key be left with him, and the servant did so. That's how the idiot went to the library. He knows that this is not a training room or a dining room. Apparently, the pompous turkey went to the library because of the documents. How funny are his attempts? Is there another key? Unfortunately, there was only one copy of the key to the Duke's library, so if it were lost, the lock would have to be changed. The only thing missing is that the main character will have to beg for the key to the library from this impudent idiot. Layla didn't want to talk to him at all or see his stupid face either, and there was only one key. The girl asked if the Duke was in the library. No, Williot was in his bedroom, which meant that the scoundrel was probably there with him. So for now, we'll have to forget about the library. It's a pity, but nothing can be done. She won't go to Phelan. Upon returning to the room, Michelle informed her mistress that the Archmage had tried to contact her. The main character adjusted the folds of her dress and hair and sat down neatly and gracefully on the sofa in front of the crystal ball. From the magic sphere came the greeting of Lady Tebessa. She had not been seen for a long time. Layla greeted the Viscount. Surely something had happened. The Viscount would like to discuss with her preparations for the rainy season. Layla knew it. That was why he had contacted her at such a time. The main character proudly announced that from now on the affairs of the estate do not concern her at all. All issues are handled by the Duke, but not by Phelan Willio. In the future, the Viscount would need to contact him specifically on work matters. The Viscount understood, but they urgently needed an approved budget. The heroine didn't want to discuss anything with the idiot. Let them communicate directly, but Sir can use the ball for communication only once.